Hey everyone, well I am back here at my workbench. This time I've got a Stihl MS440 here. Along with the 044s, these 440s were a very sought after saw. Unfortunately, like most saws it seems that I've picked up lately, there's always seems to be major issues with them. So I bought this saw as a running saw. Somebody else told me about it. Said they knew a guy that had the saw. It was supposed to have been gone through, but it was not all original. All the exterior casing of the saw is all OEM. I've checked it out, but it had supposed to have had an aftermarket top end put on it because it was cooked. Like always, I don't trust what anybody says anymore. So I dug into it, pulled this cylinder off. I was assured that this cylinder was supposed to be a top quality aftermarket kit. Well, again, probably one of the cheapest, shittiest cylinders that I have seen to date yet in the aftermarket cylinders. The cylinder on this one, very poor plating in it. Before the plating was put in, it's got some rough, almost potch marks you can see under the plating, and you can actually feel it in one spot. So I took some little bit coarser grit emery cloth here just with my thumb, and I worked it here a couple spots, and the plating is very thin. I didn't burn through the plating, but I took the rough spots off, so that goes to show just how soft the plating is. There's definitely not a Nicosil or any other kind of chromiate whatever. It's just a cheap chrome plating. So one thing I will say is the piston is actually decent as far as fit in the bore, doesn't rattle around, and it's got good connecting rod end fitment there. But this wasn't the issue. I thought if the whole saw, the crankcase and the base part of the saw is all OEM, crankcases are, everything looked good there until I pulled the cylinder off, and that's where I had a bit of a nasty surprise. The crankshaft in this saw was swapped out for a cheap aftermarket Chinese crankshaft. And how do I know it? The side of the rod, one side says 440 on it, and the other side says China. So at this point I know it probably has cheap aftermarket crank bearings and crank seals, and the guy bragged that he put a new OEM intake boot on it, which it does. It has the Stihl insignia and the Stihl part number on it. It's got a OEM Stihl impulse line, brand new. It's got an OEM Stihl fuel line on it, brand new. What this saw was put together to make it look like it was all OEM except for the piston and cylinder, which the seller claimed that was. Dig into it a little deeper, and it's got more issues than that. So another thing the seller didn't tell me was this was a saw that was pieced together from a broken or crushed saw. The original OEM handlebar was on here, but it was all bent kittywampus out of place, pushed in towards the starter recoil, and bent over where you couldn't even pour oil into the oil tank. And by being bent and twisted over, it was pulling the whole airbox fuel tank over, and the covers were almost touching in this corner. Now, when they sent me some pictures of it, he had turned the saw at an angle and took pictures at different angles so that you couldn't actually see this part of the handlebar here where it was bent. Now, I will say, seeing that this saw is already now at this point basically a half and half of Chinese and OEM parts, I went ahead and ordered an aftermarket handlebar for it, and to its credit, I paid only 23 bucks for the handle and free shipping, and it's actually a very rigid handle. It doesn't flex. I've tried, and it's very stiff. It's got a nice shape and size, got a nice rubber grip on it, and it fits to the crankcase and to the tank exact alignment of the holes. So that part of seeing, like I said, that seeing we've got so much aftermarket other crap on it, well, we might as well keep on with the aftermarket. Now, if this saw would have had an OEM crankshaft, I do have a OEM 044 or 440 cylinder with the decomp and everything for the fit this saw. Don't ask me in my collection of crap. I have a cylinder for it, and no, I will not be selling it. So those of you out there wondering, don't ask. I'm hanging on to this for now. You say, well, you could probably find a good used crank and go ahead and swap it out. Yeah, I could. But I noticed in the bottom of the crankcase, this saw is suffering from what many of these Stihl saws from this era is having issues with, and that's the paint is starting to lift or peel inside of the bottom of the crankcase. So all I did was took a sharp flat screwdriver, scraped up a whole bunch of that any of the loose paint that would come off. Now I'm going to do a final rinse on it. I've cleaned the base where the cylinder was. They probably had like 2 old gaskets on it before it had been peeled off, and nobody ever cleaned it properly. They used some cheap RTV red silicone sealant on there and an extra chewy thick paper gasket. When I did check the squish on it, it was like over 60,000. The saw was only making like 130 or 135 psi compression. And yes, the guy sent me a video of it sitting idling, and he revved it up a few times. But obviously it was just it was just put together out of pieces, mostly out of Chinese parts, other than the outer casing of the saw being an original. All the main important internal guts of it is cheap aftermarket. Pretty disappointed. No, I didn't pay a horrible price for it, luckily. But still, it's turning into another one of these project saws that I wasn't too thrilled about. So, anyways, we're into it now. Like I said, getting back to this cylinder, I noticed a couple of the bolts on here were very hard to thread out. I was worried. I thought maybe the threads were pulled or stripped in the crankcase. No, that's not the issue there. The threads are good down there, luckily. But typical of a lot of these cheap aftermarket cylinders, the cylinder bolts will fit just fine in a couple of the holes here. They have a nice, not super loose and not super tight, but the one here barely will go in, and the other one you have to physically thread it in to get it to go in. So the hole is machined smaller. At that rate, who knows? There's some scuffing on the piston intake side here already, so alignment of the cylinder bore is probably not the greatest. So what am I going to do? Do I go ahead and put this piston into my OEM cylinder? Nope, can't. OEM cylinder is a 50mm bore, and this aftermarket is one of those big bore 52mm kits. Or basically what you could call it is instead of a 044 440, it's a 046 460. So like I say, basically they bought the crankshaft, the cylinder, piston kit as one of those all-in-one with the seals and bearings that you can get for like 50 bucks online, and that's what they did. This saw was put together out of leftover parts, and ports on here are cockeyed and kind of not the greatest shape, but I will say I do like the upper transfers on here. It's got nice wide long ports, bigger than the original OEM cylinder, but the lower transfer ports are smaller and kind of lopsided. So I'm going to go ahead and elongate them and draw them down and chamfer the edges of them and get rid of any sharpness. The intake port here has got a couple of sharp edges on the plating, so I'll go ahead just with some emery cloth and clean it up and break that edge and work at it, and so that it doesn't rub the piston or hang up a ring. And like I say, shape and form of the ports is pretty rough. There's a lot of overcasting or overflash. I'll clean them up a little bit. It doesn't matter on the intake much because I'll texture it anyways, like I always do. Exhaust side, I'm just going to clean up some rough, weird, whatever. Not going to, like I say, there's some overflash there that's going to catch some carbon, so I'll clean that up. Not going to do anything too much to this or spend too much time on it, because chances are, if the cylinder doesn't eat it, the crank will probably blow in it at some point before too long. Seeing that the crankcases themselves are already not in the seem to be in the greatest of shape. They're not horrible, but seeing that it's peeling paint, that's usually a sign that the saw won't last too long if you try and run them out. Like I say, I scraped off any of the loose paint that it will give. I'll wash it out with saw gas a couple times. They did a pretty lousy job putting this together because even there was a whole bunch of mung and schmutz or whatever you want to call it there in the bottom of the crankcase, just black grime and dirt. No, that's not from wear in from the cylinder or the piston, because it hasn't been run enough to do that. It's literally just dirt from taking the saw apart. They didn't even clean it proper. They just pulled the dirty saw apart, slapped the crank in it, put it back together. I'll go ahead and put it together and see if it'll run okay, if the seals hold, if he did a decent job installing that. Who knows? If not, then I'll just buy some cheap Chinese seals, put them in there, and like I say, we're gonna make this sucker make it go. See how long it will go. Now I will say, like I say, the recoil is all OEM, gas tank is OEM, crankcases are OEM, brake handle is OEM. As far as I know so far, the clutch and clutch drum, that's aftermarket as well. Oil pump is supposed to be OEM, and from what I can see, it does have a little number or stamp on it there, so I think that is an OEM oil pump on it. Muffler is OEM. It's not a dual port. This is a 044, or this is an MS440 Magnum. The Magnum series was supposed to have a dual port muffler, and this has a single port muffler, so they just swapped out one from a regular MS440 or 044 on it to, like I say, a single port outlet. But I will enlarge the port and give it more oomph there, so to speak. Doesn't have the big HD high capacity air filter on it. Just has the standard regular fair filter that they would have came with. So like I say, it does have the Walboro carb on it. It's got the OEM, still has the OEM carb on it here. Let's see here, what's the number? Stamped on here. It says right on here Walboro, and it is HD17A. Does that make sense? So anyways, that's what it's got. So that's what we're going to run. A little ticked off again as usual that people keep swapping in these cheap aftermarket parts and try to hook people down the road or down the line with that. Of course, instead of just selling it as a blown up part saw, at least then you know what you got. And if I wanted to, I could have already if I wanted to, I can change out the cylinder for an OEM one, which I have. My choice if I want to run a Meteor piston or track down an OEM piston at that rate, whatever, then, or sell the saw with a blown top end and a bad crank, then at least you know what you're getting. But then, of course, they know they'd only get, less than $100 or whatever, right, for a parts saw. And they're not going to sell a saw like that. Instead, they throw a $50 kit in it and try and get a few $100 out of it. So that's how it goes. That seems to be the name of the game, but that's not my game, and that's not the shit that I play or pull. So when I build saws, if I build them OEM, they're built OEM. If I put something aftermarket in it, they have aftermarket, and it's mentioned and told to people. Not that I built anything for anybody too much, other than a few friends. I've fixed up some stuff for them, but other than that, even for my own saws, if I was to sell somebody one of my saws, which I haven't at this point, but if I was, if it's all OEM, I'll tell you it's all OEM. If it's got something aftermarket, I'll tell you it's got something aftermarket. I'm getting a little bit fed up with these people and their bullshit antics of, screwing everybody around with this. And from a bunch of people that I've talked to now in the industry, it seems to be that this is becoming a standard fare or trend in the last few years here. Everybody's now buying up these aftermarket kits left, right, and center, slapping together parts and pieces of blowing up old saws they had in sheds that they gave up on a long time ago. And a few guys will disclose that it's made up of half aftermarket parts, but far too many people are putting lipstick on a pig and selling claiming to be all OEM and whatchamacallit. So I guess the con artists are coming out of the knot holes now, so to speak. So peddling something that's not, that people are trying to sell a good that isn't as advertised. I'm sorry, you're going to get called out on it. So getting fed up with this shit of people pulling garbage like this. So I don't have an issue with clone saws if they're sold as such, and the market is now flooded with them. We all know if you want to play around with that, fine. I don't have an issue with it. I have, up to this point, not got into that. I've wanted to buy all OEM, doesn't matter, blown up saws, and I'll make a saw, to spec, because I want to know how they run. I want to know what it's like to have a vintage classic all OEM saw and how it performs. At some point in the future, and probably going to be coming in the near future. I'm probably going to start playing with some of these clone saws, because at this point, why am I buying that are half made up out of cheap aftermarket parts, and not even decent aftermarket parts? There are some companies out there that do sell some decent aftermarket parts, but what's happening is guys are buying the absolute cheapest shit that they can find on Amazon or eBay for 30, 40, 50 bucks, buying piston and cylinder kits for $35, and then saying that, oh no, it's a high-end Meteor or Highway, or even it's not even a Farmer Tech cylinder. I don't know what it is. It's as cheap as it gets. Now somebody say, well, if you're ticked off about it, then don't be in the saw game. Well, I'm sorry. That's no way to do business. If you're going to play around with aftermarket shit, then play around with cheap aftermarket saws. If you're going to build an OEM saw and claim that it's an OEM saw, then put the goods in it or don't do it. Sell it to somebody else or send it down the line or whatever as a part saw. But unfortunately, it seems that this is all, everybody thinks it's funny and fair game, and oh well, let it be somebody else's problem. Well, I know we're living in screwed up times, but anyways, that's my rant. And so, one more project for the channel. Hang on, guys. We're going to get this one put together, and going to be put together with a whole bunch of crap, cheap aftermarket shit, and we're going to run it and let her roll till she blows. Let's see what we can do with this one. Put a little bit of my stink on it. Not going to do anything wild with it, because if I try to do too much with it, it's just going to blow up that much quicker. So it'll be a base gasket delete, clean up the ports a little bit. I'm already have the piston marked out, so you already know what I'm going to be doing. I'm probably going to cut the skirts on the piston to give it a little more intake timing, and we're going to let her rip. See what happens. Anyways, we're going to call this a video. Just like to say thanks everybody for stopping by and checking out another one of my videos, and we'll see you all in the next one.